Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Hoover Institution. My name is Ben Ginsberg, and I'm delighted to welcome you here. First, one administrative matter. Please silence your cell phones. And there's... They show up. And there is no recording permitted of today's event. Thank you. We're very pleased to have you here at Hoover, a preeminent research center where our staff and scholars dedicate themselves to supporting the mission of producing policy ideas that promote economic prosperity, national security, and democratic governance. In addition to being a revitalizing American institution, distinguished visiting fellow, I've been an election lawyer for many years, have some familiarity with Justice Kennedy's courtroom, and am very much looking forward to today's discussion. It's my great honor to welcome to the stage our director, former National Security Advisor, and 66th Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, and Justice Anthony Kennedy. Justice Kennedy was born in Sacramento, California. He graduated from Stanford in 1958 after spending a year at the London School of Economics, and then earned his law degree from Harvard in 1961. His distinguished legal career began in private practice, much of it as a solo practitioner in Sacramento. During those years, he also taught constitutional law at the University of the Pacific's McGeorge School of Law. Justice Kennedy was appointed in 1975 to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit by President Gerald R. Ford, becoming the youngest federal appellate judge in the country. On February 18, 1988, he was sworn in as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States after nomination by then-President Ronald Reagan and unanimous Senate confirmation, the last justice to receive unanimous Senate confirmation. Over his 30 years on the court, Justice Kennedy became known for his thoughtful, case-by-case approach and his ability to bridge ideological divides. He was the deciding vote on many of the court's most notable opinions, and he helped shape the law on many questions, including those of liberty, dignity, and equality. He authored more than 1,000 opinions during his time on the bench. Today, he joins us to share reflections from his just-published memoir, Life, Law, and Liberty, in which he charts his life in the law while noting the broader sweep of the law and civic life. It's a rare chance to hear directly from one of the most influential jurists of our time. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Justice Anthony Kennedy and Director Condoleezza Rice. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ben, for that wonderful introduction. And I just want to note that Ben mentioned his association with a center here at the Hoover Institution called the Center for Revitalizing American Institutions. We believe strongly that the United States was bequeathed an exceptional set of institutions by the founders, and it's our responsibility to make certain that they endure and that we nurture them. And it's in that regard that I could not have a better guest than Justice Anthony Kennedy, who has devoted his life to that. We're going to get into your book in a little bit, and it is a wonderful read. I think I read it in... No, quite. I read it in 3 settings, just 3 sittings, so that's really good. My books take a lot longer, so it's really very well done. So I'd like to actually, first of all, welcome you back. You've been here with us at Hoover before. Welcome back to Stanford. I'd like to welcome some members of your family who are here, your son, Justin, your daughter, Kristen, your grandson, Nick, and of course the incomparable Mary, who figures very much in this book. I really think that this book is, let me start by saying I think it's really a testament to a kind of ode to the idea of America. And that theme runs through this book. And so we have the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence next year. It's a time to reflect on our country. It's a time to be grateful for what we have been given. And before we get into the memoir, I wonder if you'd just reflect a little bit on the idea of America and how you see it as one who was charged with securing it and defending it from the Supreme Court and from many other elements of your life.
Well, thank you, and let me just say it's such a pleasure and a privilege, of course, always to be with you, Secretary, and thank you so much for the welcome you've given to all of us. Next year will be the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Then 9 years later will be the 250th anniversary of the Constitution of the United States. The Declaration was the promise. The Constitution was the fulfillment. Suppose you look back 250 years and you had a time capsule. And the reason I ask that is because I'm on the committee to celebrate the 250th anniversary, and we're going to have a time capsule. If you have any suggestions as to what to put in it, let me know. But both today and if you look back 250 years from now, the thing I would put in the two things I would put in the time capsule are the Declaration and the Constitution. Look back 250 years from now. They didn't obviously know about railroads or motor cars or electricity or telephone, much less atomic power. And if you had asked them, would the Constitution survive, if you put it in a time capsule 250 years ago, it's curious to me what answer you would be given. Jefferson would have probably said no. He thought it would last for about 20 years, and he thought it should be amended all the time. And it's been amended only 3 or 4 times like the Bill of Rights, you count all as one time. So if they had put it in a time capsule, they would say, oh, this won't survive 250 years. It did, because the Constitution defines who we are. The Constitution with a small c is what many political theorists write about when they talk about Europe. A Constitution with a small c is the sum total of your customs, your traditions, and your mores. That's the Constitution of the people. And that's with a small c. And we sometimes use Constitution with a small c. He has a strong, or she has a strong Constitution. But when we think of Constitution, we think of capital C. The Constitution that the framers wrote kind of in 3 months, and people talk about George Washington's contributions. His first great contribution was winning the war. His second, or his third, was establishing the presidency and having the honor to resign after 2 terms. Midway, Washington presided over the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. And a couple of times, usually the small states and the larger states would say, you know, we've had enough, we're out of here. Washington would say, gentlemen, please stay. And you didn't walk out on the general. And one of his great contributions was that he kept them in that room for 3 months and gave us the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution with this large C. And it's the Constitution that defines us as a people. And if you had put it in the time capsule 250 years ago, would it have survived? Well, it did survive. It flourished, as it indicated, defines us who we are. Now, what about 250 years from now? We're going to put it in the time capsule. That's my contribution, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Will it survive 250 years from now? No one knows. will it survive 10 years from now with all the changes with AI and so forth? It's hard to predict what the U.S. will look like 10 years from now, Secretary, much less 250 years. But we're putting it in the time capsule. And in any event, whether or not it survives, people will understand and we hope admire who we are.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That's a wonderful testament. And so now I'd like to get to that book that spends so much time talking about who you are. I think you always asked, who am I? And also where you came from. So one of the things that was just really striking to me was that you considered the spirit of the West and the spirit of California. Now, you probably don't talk about this as much when you're at home on the East Coast, but this is really your home, California.
Right.
Talk about that spirit of the West, the way that you talked about it in the book.
Well, for generations, the Americans on the East Coast were attracted to the West, initially the Midwest, because there was a sense of adventure, of freedom, of opportunity, of open space, both in the figurative and the literal sense, for you to define yourself, to make your own occupation, your own family, your own life, and you kept going further west. Steinbeck said, "We're always east of Eden." You're trying to find Eden by going further west. What happens when you come to California? Are you still east of Eden? Well, you could go to Honolulu, I guess, but that doesn't quite count. But it seems to me that in the West, here in California, because of its richness, its beauty, its natural resources, what is it, 700 miles from the southern border to the northern border, a magnificent seacoast, mountains, you can go on and on. It means that you are in a place of such beauty and such opportunity that you can still travel west in the sense of finding a new life, a new destiny.
Thank you.
So that now, in a way, if you're an Easterner, does it sound as though, the West? What are they talking about? Well, in the East and the West, we look forward. In the East, they begin by looking backwards. They're very proud of the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, all that they accomplished in pre-colonial, colonial, and times and at the time of the founding. So they begin looking back, and with that pride, and with that admiration for what the framers did, they then too look forward.
Yes.
They then too look forward.
We always say Stanford is half the age of our Eastern peers.
Oh, interesting.
So it really shows it, yes. So speaking of Sacramento and your life there, two things really struck me. One was the lessons from your father and the example of your mother. The example of your mother in civic life and her insistence on being a part of the civic life, because, when de Tocqueville came to the United States in 1835, he said Americans have these voluntary associations, he called them.
Right.
And he meant civic life. But your father, one story that really got to me was he was offered some land that had belonged to a Japanese farmer who had been interred.
Yes.
And what did he do?
Beginning with my mother, she grew up in San Francisco. She went to Stanford. Her older sister did it as well. I don't write this because I'm not 100% sure. I think she was the first woman elected to a student body office at Stanford. And she was always tremendously active and loved Stanford. She spoke German. She did her thesis. She wrote her thesis in German. I'm not quite sure what it was about. She loved Stanford and was the president of the alumni board. And she came back one time, and I think the story is that initially, Secretary, I wrote 2 books, and the publishers, because I was most interested in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and Stanford. And the publisher said, no, it has to be 1. So it took me 2 years to make the 2 into 1. So I forget what the story, if the story's in or out. But there was President Kennedy of Stanford, no relation, but he knew my mother well. And she came down and she said, we have the Railroad Museum in Sacramento, which my mother was a large part responsible for establishing. And it's one of the great railroad museums in the country. And she said, we want the Leland Stanford engine in Sacramento, because Sacramento was the western point for the Transcontinental Railroad, Sacramento, California, Independence, Missouri, back and forth. And she said, we want the Leland Stanford engine, and to bring it to Sacramento. He said, well, we don't allow Stanford property to be taken off the campus. And she said, do you know where it is? And he said, oh, it's in Corporation Yard number 1 or number 2, maybe number 3. She said, you're right on all counts. It's in all 3, rusting. And when the press hears about it, they won't be. He said, the engine's yours. So that's how we got the engine to Sacramento. And it just so happens that the Southern Pacific Railroad has one of its major shops in Sacramento, and they, as a charity, refurbished the engine and shined it, painted it, made it run. It still runs, and it's part of the Railroad Museum. So that was my mother's closeness to Stanford. My father had to spend two years in an orphanage. His own, he never knew his own father. Who they were miners. If you look at Idaho, there's that little peak that goes up to the north and touches Canada, and that's where Mullen, Idaho is, not too far from Spokane, Washington. And his father and 2 of his brothers were killed in the mines, and he had to spend 2 years in an orphanage. But then his mother found a job working at a ranch in eastern Washington, and there was a woman owned the ranch, and her name was Mrs. Cassidy, and my father, Anthony, came to live with her, and she was very interested in him, and taught him how to read literature, and he was reading Shakespeare at an early age, and he then worked his way in the lumber mills in order to go to California, where he wanted to go to the University of California, Berkeley. He worked on the docks in order to be able to afford to go to the university, and then he was, what do you call it, the people that help serve, a hasher?
Mm-hmm. Hasher, food service.
Yes. And he did that, and did very, very well in undergraduate, and then he went to the Berkeley Law School. Then he worked, James Rolfe was governor, strike that, before that he was mayor of San Francisco, Jimmy Rolfe. My father started work for him right out of law school, because he did very well in law school. And then when Rolfe was appointed governor, he could take only 3 people with him to Sacramento, and he took my father with 1.
Fantastic.
And so that's how we came to Sacramento.
That's
and
fantastic.
My father met my mother there.
You met your mother there. And the rest is history. When your father died, you took over his practice. You then appointed to the bench. You said that you were asked to be appointed to a bench, but that had elections. And you and I had a little talk last night about people who don't want to run for office.
Right.
Yeah. So you want to tell us?
Well, I was a solo practitioner, which is now kind of out of date. But many of my clients were my father's clients, and they decided they would retain me because they wanted somebody younger who could take care of their estates and their businesses. They had big business, so they thought it was a good idea to have somebody that doesn't know anything learn about it and become their lawyer. So that's how my practice developed. But they were, some of them becoming nationwide, some international, and I was going to states around the country as they were establishing new plants. And I went to Eastern Europe, to Japan, and often to Mexico. I established a plant for them in Mexico City, and I actually had to help design the building because it was all wrong. And people said, "How are you interested in architecture?" I said, "Well, I designed a sausage plant." I put that on my resume. I later helped design courthouses and so forth. But in any event, Secretary, I was so busy traveling around the country and some international. The kids were growing up without me. I just didn't have time for the kids and for Mary. So the opportunity came to be on the bench, and it seemed to me wise that for the family. Mary knew that it was a financial sacrifice. We talked about it, but it's been wonderful. Reagan, as you mentioned, told me there was a vacancy on the Ninth Circuit. My practice was almost all in the state courts. I went to superior courts. My goal was to appear in all 52 counties, and I think I made 14. I fell a little bit short, but I appeared in the courts around Sacramento. And I told then Governor Reagan, I said, you know, there's two things you should never ask me. He said, "Oh, what's that?" I said, one, don't ask me about politics. I try to be an informed citizen to know what the issues are and so forth. But so far as campaign strategies and so forth, I don't know anything about it. Plus, he had one of the great political teams of the era. Mm-hmm. He had a marvelous political team. Mike Deaver and Ed Meese in Sacramento, and then Justin Dart and the whole kitchen cabinet in Los Angeles. So I think, A, don't need my advice on politics, and B, I don't know anything about it anyway. He said, what's the other thing? And I said, don't ever ask me who should be appointed a judge. He said, well, that's where you can really be of help. And I said, maybe so, maybe no. But if you get the reputation as a judge maker or a judge breaker, it doesn't help the relation you have with the bench. That judge may either lean over in your favor, or in order to show his or her independence, lean against you. I said, I don't want it. He never, and he told Nancy about that, and she made it clear that I should have access to the governor whenever I thought it would be helpful. I told him I'd never work for the government. Well, you shouldn't say that when you're young. But then the vacancy came on the circuit, and my practice was in the state courts. I barely knew where the Ninth Circuit was. I didn't know any of the judges on it. I'd had one case that had gone to the Ninth Circuit. It was settled before it was argued. But I talked with Mary, and we thought it would be good. And the Ninth Circuit has its headquarters in seven. The Ninth Circuit is 9 western states, plus what was then the territory of Guam, and now it was still was then the territory of Hawaii, and then the state of Hawaii, and then Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas.
So you got to know Governor Reagan, and then President Reagan asked you after some toing and froing with other justices. I had forgotten the relationship of your appointment to Bork's failure.
Right.
And then Ginsburg, but you become a Supreme Court justice. And you really were around for some of the most consequential cases in our history. But I want to start, before I talk about a couple of those, very much at the core of everything that you thought about was freedom of speech. And talk a little bit about how you saw it. One thing that surprised me a little bit is the degree to which, I always thought that at the Supreme Court, the justices just sat there and they just read what was in the case, and they read. But you read broadly, you thought broadly, philosophically about the country and freedom of speech. And this is an enduring issue for the United States of America even today. How do we think about free speech? Can you talk a little bit about about freedom of speech and how you thought about it on the court?
Freedom of speech, of course, is essential to any functioning democracy. Many people say, well, it's the First Amendment, that's what's one. It actually was not the First Amendment. There were two amendments before that in the Bill of Rights that didn't get ratified. So the First Amendment was really the Third Amendment insofar as the First Amendment. But we'll take it.
Yeah, it doesn't sound quite as good, the Third Amendment, I agree. Yeah, right.
But freedom of speech, to begin with, means your freedom of thought, your freedom to read, to write, to think, to talk, to define who you are. Freedom of speech helps you define who you are. You are what you think, what you say, what you feel, what you dream about, and all this is protected by the Constitution. But the second point of free speech is it's fundamental to democracy, so that we can make our democracy work. Aristotle talked about this. Aristotle said, I know you have many classical scholars in the room, and I'm just a gadfly, but Aristotle said, speech is essential to democracy because you must have an honest, thoughtful, rational, use the term rational in Greek, rational discourse with other citizens, and if you don't have that, democracy will fail. Democracies can die, and he saw democracies die. And that's because at the end of the day, there is not a thoughtful, rational discourse. People we call it now, what do they call a party identity, political identity. That's not quite the right word. A party identity. Yeah. And because you're a member of Party X, you think this. And since I'm a party of Y, I won't talk to you. This is very dangerous to our democracy, and very much. It seemed to me and to many others that when the internet came, we can say, oh, well, now we can talk to more people. Now we'll have discussion on a much broader level. It actually works the other way around. There's a book called I'll think of the name at midnight, about the internet, and the writer points out that people on the internet talk only to those with whom they agree. They talk only to members of Party X or only a member of Party Y, because they know if you're a member of Party X what they think, or Party Y what they think. And so the idea of an open discourse has actually turned out the other way, and we're becoming more narrow because of the internet. And this surprised many, and it's of concern.
As a Justice of the Supreme Court, you freedom of speech we've talked about was core, but you decided a lot of cases also that had huge social ramifications for the country, move the country forward in terms of the relationship between citizens, decisions about abortion, decisions about gay rights, decisions about the death penalty for juveniles. Talk some about the hardest decisions that you had to make among those. You talk eloquently in the book about each of them, and recognizing, that you were making decisions that were going to change the course of who Americans were and how they related to one another. How did you go about it? How did you think about that?
Well, people used to ask me, what's the hardest case you've ever had? I said, the case I'm working on now. In looking back, one of my hard cases was the flag burning case. And Texas had a state law that made it a criminal offense to burn an American flag. And some young man was mad at something, I don't know what he was mad at, but he burned the flag, and he was not only convicted, but Secretary was sentenced to some time in prison or county jail. And the case came to us, and it was interesting because 3 members of the court had fought in World War II. Rehnquist, White, and
Stevens?
Stevens, John Stevens was in the U.S. Navy. They all said that this statute was unconstitutional. They had risked their lives to defend this flag that this young man burned, and they were joined by one other. So it was a 5-4 opinion, and I wrote a separate opinion. And I said it is poignant but fundamental that the flag protects those who hold it in contempt. The whole idea of the flag is that it protects free speech. And it was clear, if somebody said burning something is expression, well of course. Secretary, after the decision, within a week, something like 80 senators got to the floor of the Senate to denounce the court. And it was in June, and we had just left to go to Europe for my summer teaching. But we read the accounts in the newspapers. And 80 senators got to the floor of the Senate, or something around that number, to denounce the court. Editorials were very strongly critical of the court. But then it was interesting. One of the fascinations about Supreme Court decisions is that we give reasons for what we do, and those reasons are designed to inspire allegiance to the court's decision, even if you disagree. You know that the court gave reasons for what it does, and you accept it. And we hope that those reasons might convince you that your initial reaction was wrong. And that turned out to be what happened around the country. People began to say, you know, that free speech, that young kid in Texas, he was trying to say something. That's my free speech right as well. And over time, the case found acceptance. Yeah. And we hope that's the way the decision will work. And then you mentioned some other cases, and the gay rights case. It was assigned to me, and I had my law clerks look up the history, and we went back even to the pre-Christian era to see if there was any recognition of homosexual marriage, and we could find basically an island of Lesbos, maybe an exception, but basically marriage had changed. It used to be that the man owned the woman, even at the beginning of, even in the colonial times, and there was a divorce, the man had the children. He owned all the property. Over time, the status, the dignity of the woman was recognized. So marriage changed. It was still man and woman. But it was very important for us to recognize that the states had allowed gay people to adopt children. And at the time of the decision, there were over 100,000 children who'd been adopted by gay parents. And in some states, only one parent was recognized as the adopted parent. And so the child had only one parent who could come and see him or see her in the hospital or sign school papers or whatever. And the child had to say he had only, or she had only one parent. And this was a very, very important consideration for us in coming to the conclusion that we did. And I wrote an opinion which people quote part of it in marriages, and somebody said, you passed the refrigerator test. I said, what's that? Well, if you write something that's really interesting, the family, the mother and the father, put it on the refrigerator door for the family to read. So it apparently passed the refrigerator test.
I want to ask you one other question about relations among justices, and then I've got one final question and a couple of questions from the audience. But your relationship around this case and others, Scalia. It was broken for a while, but there's a very touching story about how you came back together.
Nino was very certain, almost vehement about his views, which was fine. We loved to hear him talk in conference, and he had a sense of humor. We could tease him about his approach, and he'd know what, he'd laugh. And was so articulate about presenting his point of view that it was tremendously helpful at conference in telling us how the issue was defined, even if we didn't agree with his opinion on it. But when the gay rights case came out, he just hit the roof and wrote a dissenting opinion which was critical of me personally. And he soon became very unhappy at the court. He didn't come to our court lunches, and we still shook hands. That's our tradition at the beginning of a conference or going on the bench. But other than that, he was taciturn, and he was very unhappy. After, I don't know, make it up, 8 or 9 months, he came by my chamber, said he wanted to see me. And he said, I came to apologize for my opinion. It was intemperate and unfair. And we talked about them. We started talking about other things about the cases. And I said, Nino, you have to take care of yourself. You're traveling a little bit too much. And he said, yes, you know, I'm going to Texas for a week to give some speeches. But he said, Tony, this is my last long trip. And neither of us were big on the hugging department, but we gave each other a little hug. And he said, Tony, this is my last long trip. And those were the last words he ever spoke to me. He died 10 days later. But his wife, Maureen, called me. They live right down the street from us, so immediately when we heard the news of his death, she came over to us and to tell us what had happened. And she said, when he came home after his talk for you, he was happier than he'd been in months. So it worked. Reconciliation. And it's important for us to realize that our friendships are limited because our lifetime is short. So you must keep your friendships.
Beautiful. So I have one more question for you, and it involves somebody we both know or knew. So you ended up in the office of Vladimir Putin at one point. One thing that you may not know about Justice Kennedy was that he spent a lot of time actually helping other judiciaries, other judges internationally understand the basics of democracy. And we first met when I was National Security Advisor, and you came by to tell me about some of those efforts in China and in Eastern Europe and the like. But I love the story about Putin, and especially the punchline with Vladimir Putin. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you saw him, and then I'm going to give the punchline.
Well, as you indicated, it seemed to me important for us to talk to judges in foreign countries about judicial independence and the importance of the rule of law, because this is a way to begin to teach their countries about freedom. And so one of the things on my calendar and my personal agenda was to spend time in foreign countries with other judges. And I went to Russia about 3 times before Putin came into office and spoke with judges. They had a luncheon for the judges in Moscow, big room. And I said, you know, I have to admit that my concept of Russia is from reading Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. And I said, I know that that's dated. They said, no, that's the Russia we love. I was so interested. They love their country, and they love the idea and the reality of Russia hundreds of years ago in the Tolstoy, Dostoevsky era. And so they said, no, that you're doing exactly the right thing. And it seemed to us that after the fall of the wall under Gorbachev, that the judges would have some more independence. Because what was happening, they would make a decision that a local tax was illegal. And the next day the tax was being collected. And we're so fortunate in our country, we make a decision, even if people don't like it. Miranda or the school Pledge of Allegiance case, within 24, 48 hours, everybody's following the law. That just didn't happen in Russia. Putin's people knew that I'd been to Russia a lot, and I was teaching in Salzburg. Salzburg became an international diplomat center. It didn't have the formality of Vienna, but the Russian consul and the American consul could go to lunch together and talk together. Some of them came to my classes, just maybe once or twice, and I got to know many of them. One of my classes, I had part U.S., part other countries, and one of my classes had 2 Russians in it, Russian students from St. Petersburg University, and they told their classmates that they had to pay a bribe to come to my course. It was never clear to me if the bribe was to the government or to the university, but they had to pay a bribe. And the students told me, and I told this to Dmitry Kosov, who was one of the consular officials there and who turned out to be very close to Putin. And Putin came into office. He'd been in office just for a couple of weeks. We didn't even have a U.S. ambassador yet. And Putin was very distressed to hear that this story was going around. And he had Kosov fly back to be one of his top aides in Moscow. So they sent a plane for me to come and see Putin, and from Salzburg, and Mary was with me, and I think I had to wait outside in a car or get to see the parts of Moscow I never saw. I walked down this long hallway all by myself, and there were mirrors on either side, and you wondered if they were watching you on the other side of the mirrors.
Most assuredly.
You've been, And so Nixon in his later times liked one-on-one talks. And that's the way Putin is. It was very important to me to have somebody from the U.S. Embassy there. Because when you meet with the head of state, number one, they dominate the room and they dominate the meeting. And you know that there's somehow more in it for them than for you. They're using you somehow. And I wasn't quite sure what this was going to be all about. But there were just the two of us plus the interpreter. And he said he was interested in, he had three objectives. One was to increase judicial independence so that the judgments of the court would be followed. The second was to improve Russia's taxation system. Taxes were being paid in vodka in some places, which some people liked, I guess. But and thirdly was to increase Russia's influence in foreign affairs. Now that third, I think, was probably his first. I think he inverted them in order to make me feel good about the judges. So we had a very long talk, probably a half hour, and he asked me to come back a couple days later. And again, I was just so worried to be the only person there. But his staff and he agreed that I could bring Harry Wolff with me, who's a friend of mine who happened to be there, and he's the Lord Chief Justice. He was the Lord Chief Justice of England. And so with the two of us go and we meet again with Putin. And Harry's opening remark was that, President Putin, Justice Kennedy and I need to know where you stand on the death penalty. Well, you don't ask a head of state a question like that. You might as in a press conference, but not in this time. So I kind of rolled my eyes. The show wasn't my question. But he proceeded to give a very learned, articulate answer on the meaning of Chapter 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights. I think it's Chapter 8, to which Russia is a signatory, and which prohibits the death penalty. And he said Russia will obey the treaty. Then he leaned across the table and he said, I've been across the table from murderers closer to them than I am to you, and I could strangle them with my own hands.
Yes.
And I wondered if the interpreter hesitated for a moment on could rather than did. But it was a terrifying moment, which Harry Wolff still remember. He said.
Yeah, that was Vladimir Putin. So let's take a couple questions from the audience.
These lights are coming. It's hard.
Yeah, it's a little hard for us to see. So.
It's hard for me to see. So
yeah, if you want to, yes, right here in the middle. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for coming. My name is Sue Valeriot. I was just wondering, who were your favorites on the court when you were there? You were there for many years, but they said Justice Kagan knew what you had for breakfast, and so I was just wondering if you had favorites that you would confer with.
The question of who were
your favorite justices. It's kind of a dangerous question, but that's all right. It's right. You're among friends. Right.
Well, we came to Washington. I told Reagan that we didn't want to come to Washington. All the kids went here to Stanford. We thought they'd all stay on the West Coast. We didn't know anybody. Mary and I were both born in Sacramento. We were looking forward to, with the kids out of college, taking little trips and so forth. And as you mentioned, there had been the Bork thing, which lasted for about 3 months, I guess. And then Ginsburg was never nominated, but he was announced. And he's a wonderful man, incidentally, a brilliant justice, a brilliant judge. And but he dropped out before his nomination, so I was the second one nominated. And the Senate was so sick of all the earlier controversy that they can confirm me. But I told Reagan that I didn't want to come back. I said, I don't know anybody back here, neither does me. He said, oh, you know me. I said, what am I supposed to do, come for lunch every day? But so we didn't know anybody, but Sandra Day O'Connor did something that maybe some people might not do. She shared her friends with us right away, as did John. And John was wonderful. If I told a joke, John had a joke on the same subject, and his was much better than mine. So we became, the O'Connors were so gracious to Mary and me, and they knew that Mary didn't know about it, and they introduced Mary to their friends around Washington, D.C., and we will never forget that courtesy. The judges or justices were a little too busy to go out often, and Mary and I are not big on doing that anyway. And in Washington, they go out during the week. You know, it was Sacramento, a small town. It was Friday or Saturday night, you know, but not in Washington. And so. But Sandra enabled us to know that. And Byron and Marianne White were helpful to us. We didn't know. We moved back in February. We had to move right away because the court was in session because of the delays over Bork and so forth. And we gave some thought to my going back right away and Mary finishing her teaching year, but I said, no, this is a new adventure. You have to share the adventure with me. And so we went back, but we didn't know where to live. And the names of the community, Chevy Estates and Bethesda and Arlington were all just names to us. But Marianne White was kind of a no-nonsense person. She said, I found your house, buy it, slam. I said, okay. And it was in McLean, just a few doors down from where they lived. And it was a wonderful choice. It's a wonderful street. And so that's how we got it. And so the Whites were very nice.
Over here. Yeah, oh, sorry. Yes, go right ahead. Yeah.
Hello, is this on?
Yes.
Good morning, and thank you. Your story of reconciliation with Justice Scalia is touching. And in light of your distinguished career and that, a good friend of mine liked to say, sometimes relationships are more important than being right. What are your thoughts in that regard?
Sometimes relationships are
more important than being right.
Well, I'll remember that. That's a good way to summarize. Of course, justices disagree. That's our job. We have to do that, and that's what makes the job interesting. But it was very, very important that we do so in a friendly way. Justice Breyer is going to come out here, I think, before too long. And he was the junior justice on a court which was the same court for 11 years. There were 9 of us together in the same room for 11 years. And you would think, well, how can it worked? Because Scalia knew that I knew that he knew that I knew what he was going to say, and we just started from there. And it's the same with the other justices. If Alito had not been appointed for just 3 more weeks, Breyer would have been the longest-serving justice in the history of the court. Now he was the second. The junior justice is in charge of the cafeteria, which Breyer had to do for 11 years. Don't ask me what kind of job he did, but that's so when Alito came, I had whispered to Scalia earlier, we made the motion that the second junior justice be in charge of the cafeteria.
Over here, yes.
Hey there, thank you so much for being here. My name's Joe Nail. I'm an Army officer and graduate student in business and international policy here. And one of the things that struck me both about your remarks and your book is your obvious patriotism. I think amongst my generation, of course, there's declining patriotism, and we see that on Stanford's campus as well, where many of my peers today would even prefer China, not America, to be the preeminent world superpower. So my question to you is, how concerned are you about this? What do you think that we can do to re-inculcate this patriotism in our young people, and what could Stanford or Hoover do in the 250th anniversary of our country coming up in 2026?
Could you repeat?
Yes, so the lack of patriotism among young people is of concern, maybe not even wanting the United States to be the preeminent country of the world. And are you concerned about it, and what can Stanford do? And I've got an answer to that part of it after you talk about patriotism.
I'm not just concerned about it, I'm very concerned. As indicated before, democracies can die. And young people, first of all, have to understand our history, to know who we are, to know you had a meeting at Hoover with some of our military people,
Yes.
and they were having trouble recruiting. And one of the things we told them was, if young people know the history of our country and the heroism that existed in historical times in order to preserve it, they will then love our country more. We must teach our young people. But there was a young teenager who lived across the street from us a couple years ago. Young teen, he was a senior in high school. And he came over, he said, I have only 2 courses left, driver's ed and civics. We have to begin teaching our children what we call civics, but what America means, American history, from at least by the third grade forward.
Yes.
It's not something you take a course in and then go on. It's part of who we are. Does that answer the question?
It does. And Justice Kennedy is going to continue to teach and be in places like this, and also help us to develop young people at Stanford who want to have a role in civic education, and so, or to take civic education and become a part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So I think concern about it is warranted, but efforts like this, hearing you and your history, it helps us a lot.
Well, thank you.
Great. Maybe one last question right here on the front. Why don't you wait for Mike's coming, okay?
Thank you very much, Justice, for coming. Is this working? So we've talked a lot about your legacy at home in the U.S., but you talked a little bit your legacy, what you tried to leave in Russia with a strong judicial system, and I guess Russia's experienced some backsliding. Have you seen any success in other international spheres where you've worked? And I guess, what's your legacy there?
So have you seen success despite the fact that Vladimir Putin didn't follow through on his promise for an independent judiciary?
Right.
Have you seen some benefits to the things that you did abroad?
Well, insofar as the Russian judiciary, I had some Russian judges who, after Putin had been in office for a very short time, were in Washington, and they cried in my office. They had tears in their eyes about what happened to the judge. In China, I went to China to teach for 1 or 2 weeks. And one of the things I did was law is undergraduate school in most countries of the world. There are only about 5 countries in the world that have graduate law schools on the American model, 3 years. So in other countries, you take law as an undergraduate. And I looked at the undergraduate curriculum at the University of Shenzhen, which is in Beijing, and their major university in Shanghai. And it was just broken. It would be as if in the United States you had to know how many justices are on the state Supreme Court in all 50 states. Who cares? It was just a memory thing, and I met with the dean. I said, this doesn't prepare your students to practice law. And we met for a day or so, and then he got together the deans from 10 other law schools, and we met again. And I made the same comment, and they said, "Well, we want you to stay for about 2 weeks, and we'll." I said, "I can't." I said, "I've got things to do." But they did change the curriculum, and they formed a new. I have to be very careful. but academicians are somewhat reluctant to change their course.
Oh, no, no.
And so that when the deans told the professors about this, this wasn't going very far. So they decided to establish a new law school, and it's a transnational school of law in Shenzhen.
Yes.
And they invited me there to open the school. And they were teaching, usually in Chinese, but on the American model. But they also have students, many of their students speak English, and 2 of my colleagues have been over there to teach. And the law school is, it's called the Transnational School of Law.
It's wonderful.
And it is developing very, very well.
What a wonderful legacy that is. And so the book is called Life, Law, and Liberty. It is for sale if you'd like to buy a copy. I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful glimpse, not just into your extraordinary career, Justice Kennedy, but into the workings of our democracy. And so thank you so much for writing it. Thank you for your decades of service to democracy and for what you continue to do. And so please help me in thanking